Josh Tyler, welcome to the Uncivilized podcast.
Happy
I
to be
have
here, man.
been circling around you for years. I think I saw, is it like brass knuckles that you have with the Savage Gentleman?
Yeah, the logo
The logo?
is brass knuckles with a straight razor on
Yes.
top. Maybe. Oh, I'm wearing a shirt. Where is it? There it is.
Bam.
That. Yeah, that.
Mm. I saw that years ago and it grabbed me. I don't even know if I was in men's work at the time. Um, so yes, this conversation has been a long time coming. For people who don't know you, would you tell our audience a little bit about what you do and what got you into it, and if you could incorporate that logo in it, man,
Man.
all the better.
Yeah. Oh, man. Who am I and what do I do?
It's such an American question, I know.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, I'm, a great way of dodging that is just saying that I'm me. And then we can get super weird and talk about I'm not really into labels and all of these things, and we can get into some like non-duality nonsense
Sure.
or whatever, right? But that doesn't help anyone. I mean, it's interesting to think about in those terms, but it's also kind of unuseful in a conversation, especially like in an introduction. Like, no, just shut up and tell me, give me an idea of of what kind of stuff you're into so I can paint a picture. And so um man, I guess first and foremost, in this point in my life, I would define myself as a father and husband. I think
Mm,
that's kind of primary to everything else. Everything kind of exists to serve that function.
mm,
Um, Prior to that, I was a professional MMA fighter
mhm,
and always had an interest in addition to fighting and athletics. I I really had a love for outdoors and adventure, particularly kind of the minimalist survival side
mhm,
of things. So, I played sports growing up, loved being outside and in the outdoors, but it wasn't until I moved out to Utah for my MMA career that I really started delving into the survival world, bushcrafting and that sort of thing.
mm,
And so as I was exploring that route, I got introduced to some pretty incredible individuals who, special forces guys that were really squared away and had a ton of knowledge. And they were working with guys, teaching them a lot of like military schools skills and survival stuff. I kind of got brought in for my martial arts background as a pro MMA fighter, and then just started absorbing a lot of the stuff. But what really stood out to me in that was seeing what happens when you show someone what they're capable of. When you take
mm,
a man who has whatever background he has and you endow him with some new skill and ability and
mhm,
confidence, it's really profound.
mm,
And there was something about that. I think that I've always been a teacher by, at heart. I mean, by
mhm,
trade, I went to college primarily to wrestle, but while I was there, I figured I might as well get a degree. Uh, and so that was actually in health and physical education. So that kind of teacher path was
yeah,
always there. But pursuing my fight career, I realized, well, I can teach at any time, but I have a
mm,
short window. So I kind of put that on the shelf, went out west, pursued my fortune there, and then that's where the spark of helping men kind of fully, I don't know, I guess recognize their potential and
mhm,
and and seeing that and wanting to just work on and instill that led to the development of the company Savage Gentleman. And so the idea of Savage Gentleman it's kind of an oxymoron, right? It's this dichotomy of being
mhm,
both savage, dare I say, uncivilized, um, but then in the same respect, like being gentleman enough to still operate within society, right? Like,
yeah,
we savagery can often have a negative connotation to it. But I think if we look at it in the same way as like uncivilized that you're using it, it's like, man, there's a very raw but beautiful
mm,
aspect of like a primitive way of being that I think we've lost
mm,
touch with. And so we need to circle back to that. We need to maybe reinstill and relearn that. but we still have to, like, you know, most of us pay our taxes and do all the things that you need to do to not,
Yeah.
you know, go bankrupt or get thrown in jail. So there needs to be a balance. And so that's what Savage Gentleman
Mm.
really was about, is taking guys that maybe are too far on the savage side
Mhm.
and helping them become a little bit more gentlemanly. Guys that are way too gentlemanly, helping them become more savage. I realized in myself that I had spent so many years on the savage side with my fighting career, just in a space of really just destruction, right? Like, I mean, the
Mhm.
whole point in fist fighting is you're destroying someone else's face. And
Mhm.
while that's a cool endeavor, I realized I had forgotten how much I had missed on
Mhm.
being creative. And so, you know, immediately tapping into the gentleman side, I was working on video content, writing, and all of these things. I realized, like, oh, that's the piece that I was missing. And so talking with other guys and interfacing and realizing, like, okay, I'm not the only one. We get stuck in this, you know, kind of trajectory that becomes often preclusive to everything else. And so we just need to be able to take a step back and look and see, like, okay, what's missing, and then work on that aspect. So the logo, oh, if you can see it here, I'm trying to get a little bit blown out. Um, the brass knuckles, obviously, you know, representing the savage side. I mean, there's
Mhm.
few things more savage than hitting someone in the face with a pair of brass knuckles. You can do a ton of damage, and, you know, if the goal is to win a fight, then you do it as decisively as possible, right? But
Mhm.
then you have the gentleman side, represented by the straight razor, which, you know,
Mhm.
understands the nuance that's involved, the intentionality of things. Like shaving with a straight razor, man, you gotta pay attention. There's skill involved. It's
Mhm.
kind of a maybe an antiquated thing, but the guys who know, I mean, obviously I don't shave very often, but uh um you know, taking the time to sharpen and hone that razor is,
Mhm.
you know, very sophisticated. And so keeping that in mind while we still have the capacity and capability of being savage, and marrying those two together, I think is kind of a sweet spot where we're all trying to exist. That was not a short
Beautiful.
introduction. I'm sorry.
That was brilliant. Thank you. It frames so much of it. I'm sure I see the parallels. Right. My idea was the primal and the divine, and
Mm,
we have a ethos tenet: be dangerous but not a danger. Like the entire thing is the yes and of some kind of duality.
yep.
There's a number of ways I can take this conversation, a number of ways I want to take it. But first, I'd love to drop in. I went through Boulder Outdoor Survival School's
Okay, cool.
month long program, and
Nice.
that was the precursor to Uncivilized. Was this whole year of kind of being with in different scenarios. And Josh, I'll tell you honestly, when I've talked about the origin of it, what I would say is I spent 3 months living in an ashram, and I met these beautiful, open-hearted, God-connected, divine gentlemen, and I never wanted to be in a physical situation where they had my back.
Mm,
I just didn't
mhm,
trust it, right? I just
sure.
didn't trust it. And coming out of Boss, I was like, these guys were machines. First of all, they wore like Daisy Dukes and flip flops when it
Mm,
snowed and had no physical problem. But I was curious how they would interact in a boardroom in New York City,
yeah,
and how many men get told pick one side or the other, right?
absolutely.
And that's it. That's your
We
path.
I mean, it's human nature to reduce things into binary, right? It's kind of a hack for the brain to parse the infinite information that it's bombarded with, right? And so if we can just reduce everything to black and white, it simplifies things. And so from a survival standpoint, in an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense. But I think with it, being able to recognize that, to like, okay, yeah, my brain is kind of, you know, simplifying this, but to recognize the situation is probably more complex. My belief in myself and my own ability should be more complex than just, okay, I'm a
Mhm,
fighter or I'm not, right?
mhm, mhm,
Um, like, yes, I can fight, but I can also heal. I can also do all of these other things. And when you start to broaden that perspective a little bit, you recognize how I think intricately tied some of these things can be together. And I think it just opens so many more possibilities that we miss when we constantly reduce everything and simplify it to the least common denominator, or however you want to define that, right? But it's like
Yeah.
we live in a world that you don't have an attention span. Most people don't have the attention span to like look beyond yes or no, cool,
Yeah.
not cool, right?
Yeah.
Is this for me? Is this not for me? And you and I both exist quite a bit in a digital realm. And so when we're making content and all of these things, it's like, man, I really want to get into the depth of whatever this concept is. But, I have 0.3 of a second to capture
Yeah.
someone's attention, or they're gone. And
Right.
I tried to play that game for a while, and I realized that, man, I don't know that I care. And I don't know that what we're doing, what I'm specifically interested in doing, um, wants to cater to the person that can't look beyond 0.3 of a second,
Yeah.
and doesn't have any interest in diving any deeper. If that's as, that's fine if you want to stay surface level, but I'm more interested in interacting with the people who have a desire to go deeper.
Hey, this is Traver. I hope you're loving this episode of the Uncivilized podcast. I certainly did. One of the things I want to let you guys know is that I run this extraordinary group called the Uncivilized Nation. And over the past 5 years, I have seen thousands of men come and transform their lives. So if you are a man interested in going from numb to fully alive, from lost to on purpose, from domesticated to dangerous in the best possible way, please check us out at www.manuncivilized.com/the nation. Again, manuncivilized.com/the nation. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah. 100%. Me too. It was one of the reasons I actually paused this podcast for almost a year. I said to my team, I need the conversations to go deeper for me to stay active in them. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you back on, or have you on, to kick things back off. I want to ask you, it's kind of a direct question, but you said the thing that I'm trying to do is bring more nuance or bring more depth. Is there a specific way you want your work to interact with the collective, or you want the collective to be affected by your work? And I'm going to make this more complex by saying what I hear so far is that you have the soul of a fighter and the soul of an artist, if that word resonates, but yet there's this deep philosophical aspect that if it's not good enough for, in your world, like go wrestle in the morning and draw pictures in the afternoon, and yay, you've done it. You've done the thing. That unless there is some contemplative aspect to it, it doesn't feel like it's what's landing with what you're putting out. Is that accurate, or have I just mumbled?
No, I think that's great. I think you've pointed out a very common thought process that a lot of people have, where it's simply checking boxes, right? Most people operate their lives based off of a routine checklist. Okay, well, here's my day. It's mapped out. I've got my planner, and on that, I have decided, to carve out this much time for my savage interests. Here's a little bit for my gentleman for today, and as long as I boop 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 hit all of those things, I mean, it's the 75 hard model, right? Nothing. I'm sure you have listeners that have done that, and I'm sure that they have gotten a ton of benefit out of it. So this isn't to poo-poo on that by any stretch. But that is a checklist, right? There's nothing in there that connects the dots. And the hope is, and I think, again, this is why it's effective, is the goal is, if you just get people moving, just get people in the habit of doing things, then eventually, on a long enough timeline, they'll connect those dots on their own. That's the hope. I think the maybe the mistake in that is the assumption that those connections will come sooner rather than later. And I think a lot of times people will give up on a system, on a program, whatever it is, before those connections arise. And then they'll say, well, this didn't work for me. I didn't get anything out of it. And it's like, you you're missing the forest for the trees. You're focusing on every single individual tree, not realizing
Mhm.
that the bigger picture of these things, that all of those trees are interconnected, whether it's
Mhm.
a birch, whether it's a maple, whether it's an oak. Like,
Mhm.
they are operating from a you know root system that is intertwined, right, with, we can get into the mycology and all that stuff if we want to get into that, but they're all part of a system that interacts together. And I think, again, we tend to compartmentalize everything. And so if you're not
Mhm.
bridging those things, I think you're missing out on a lot of, at least a lot of learning opportunities. I'm not,
Mhm.
again, I don't claim to have the answer to life or anything, figured out by any stretch, but I do think that for guys that are, I don't know, longing for something, I think it is that depth and that nuance that is really just right there in front of you if you know where to look. That
Mhm.
that could go a long ways into, I don't know, fulfilling whatever those desires are.
Say one more sentence about are right there in front of you if you know where to look, if you would.
Yeah, I think that the answers, or the thing that you're looking for, is often right there in front of you if you know how to connect the dots and see the interplay of how it's working. You said something about doing jujitsu in the morning and then going and doing art in the afternoon, right? Those
Mhm.
are two separate, distinct practices, but the secret sauce is being able to recognize they're the same, right? The way that I train my jujitsu is the same way that I approach,
Mhm.
the woodworking that I might do, right? The same
Mhm.
attention to detail, the same um, understanding of friction points, right? When I'm when I'm doing jujitsu and I'm rolling with someone, right? I don't force everything that I want to have happen, right? In the same way that when I'm working with the wood, I don't carve against the grain. There's a amount of friction that I understand is going to be detrimental. I could grab onto your gi and just death grip it, right? But at a certain point, I'm probably going to get overextended and you're going to armbar me if I don't, you know, change my tactic. And in the
Mhm.
same way, like, man, I can bang on that wood until it's into 1,000 splinters, but I haven't accomplished the goal of
Yeah.
shaping it into the thing that I'm wanting to make. And so recognizing that they are the same act, but in different, you know, locations, I think
Mhm.
really goes a long way. And I think that's a piece that we're often missing, is we become so hyper focused on whatever it is, our career, our hobbies, that, our personal development, that we don't see that they're all, it's all one and the same. The way you do one thing is the way you do all
Mhm.
things. And I think what I'm seemingly uniquely gifted at doing is helping people uh, paint better analogies and connect those dots,
Mhm.
and see that overlap a little bit better.
Yeah, man. Josh, can I ask how old you are?
I am, how old am I? 41. I'll be,
Okay.
yeah. Hmm.
Because what it sounds like, you're speaking from a place of almost eldership, even if it's not biological, but that's from a man who's been in jujitsu. Like I when you said 75 hard, I was like, beautiful, has helped a lot of people. I would love to see what 3,000 hard is, right? Like, what happens when you've done that for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years? What are the connections that you're like, man, this is now a spiritual practice? And the
Yeah.
reason I asked your age is because so many guys I know in jujitsu are now second, third degree black belts. And they're like, man, I'm using a tenth of the effort I did as a 26-year-old who just happened to be on TRT. And as 26-year-olds do in jujitsu. And now it's almost a game. It's past a different threshold where information from the meditation that morning, information from the calligraphy class, it's almost like a level of artistry or mastery that you have to get to. Or let me ask you it as a question. Do you
Hmm.
do you think there needs to be enough like core material in an activity or a practice before you can start to layer in those nuances that you're speaking about?
I think that there is a requisite amount of experience, and once just across the board. And I think
Okay.
once you have acquired enough experience, you can enter into something new. So that's not to say that you need to, have been training jujitsu for at least, 6 years and have your purple belt before you can start to appreciate these things. But you do need to have experienced at least enough variety or enough specificity in one area. 6 or half a dozen, it doesn't really matter, but there's a cumulative amount that I think allows you to appreciate things and approach it with that mentality of okay, how can I apply this in other aspects of my life, but then how can I also apply other aspects of my life into learning this, whatever that thing is, right? And so I to answer your question, I think yes, but it can be anywhere. But I think most people don't treat the things that they pursue again with the bigger picture in mind of what how this could enrich their lives, right? Most people do the thing because they like the thing, which there's nothing wrong with that. You get into playing football because you want to play football, and then you're told, well, man, if you're really good at football, you can make the starting team at high school, and if you're super good, then maybe you'll get to go to college and play, and if you are absolutely exceptional, you can go and play professionally. And I think, great, awesome, wouldn't discourage anyone for pursuing that. But when we're looking, especially like for our kids, when we're looking at getting them into different activities, it's not for this end state goal of being the best at that particular thing. It is more about what is this going to teach you about yourself? What attributes will this endow you with? And our kids are doing gymnastics right now, and so man, the physical conditioning and body awareness that they have is incredible. But more importantly than that is their connection between input and output, their ability to focus and push themselves and work hard and make improvements over time directly correlates to how well they perform and can execute a certain skill. And so it has very little to do with, okay, what scores are you getting and what are you placing in this? I've told them time and time again, I don't care what you score or what you place. That's up to you. And if you want to do better, we can help you do better. But really, we're doing this because you like doing it. And knowing that, man, is if you stick with it long enough and you really take in that experience, it's going to have farther reaching impacts. And that's really the point of doing anything. It should be, right? I mean, yes, pick things that you like, but whether it's, if you're getting into woodworking or you're getting into bushcrafting and survival, like, dude, tell me how many times you have needed to start a fire with a bow drill in your life since learning that skill. How many?
Zero.
Absolutely none. But that firecraft, if you can really look at the aspects of it and kind of dissect it, reverse engineer it a little bit, man, there are some powerful implications to what that can teach you, if nothing else, about yourself. Man, how patient can I be? How persistent can I be in a thing? What is my level of attention to detail, right? Because if you're skipping steps because you're rushing, you're probably not going to have success. I mean, making a bow drill fire is pretty unforgiving if you just kind of half-ass it and rush through part of the process. You really have to be diligent. So for me, those skills have very little to do with actual survival and anything practical that I'll need to do. Same thing with jujitsu, really. Like, how many times I've had to armbar somebody in regular life that I wasn't, at least that I wasn't getting paid to do it?
Right.
Not a single one. But
Right.
but that process has taught me a lot about myself. It's also given me the confidence to not
Mm,
feel the need to get into altercations with people, right?
right, right,
Because like, to what end?
right.
Like, I already know what I can do. So I don't need
Mm,
to prove that externally to the world. I don't need to show this guy who's, being a dickhead in the Whole Foods parking lot,
mm,
right? Who's the man and who's better at jujitsu.
yeah,
I can guarantee I can look at his ears and say, okay, you've never trained before. I will, you know, fold you like a lawn chair. But I don't
right.
need to do that because I can
Because you
go I
know.
can go fold people up, that later on that night if I need to. And I can
Yeah,
just go about my day and not, let that interaction affect me whatsoever. Just be like, "Yep, sorry, man, I bumped your cart," or whatever it
mm,
is, and just go about it. Go about the
yeah,
rest of my day without any issue.
yeah. I'll share a super fast story about gymnastics as a base. So my first jujitsu class was a nogi class with do you know
Mhm.
Eric Paulson,
Yeah.
that instructor? Yeah, it was his class. And first day, I got paired up with a purple belt who I later found out was like his first half of his athletic career was just gymnastics. And he just annihilated, like literally as a purple belt should to a newbie.
Sure.
But the fact that I was like, this guy weighs 125 pounds, I'm 170, and he feels 10 times stronger. This is a plug for anybody who has kids or who wants to get in better shape. Go to gymnastics. It is fantastic. Josh, I would love to get your view because it feels like not just specifically men, but we'll focus on that for this conversation. Societally and culturally, we're moving away from the idea of I do this because there's larger implications and moving more towards I do this because it checks the box,
Mm.
right? Like I now can have AI write my emails and I can write 600 emails today for the next 2 years and they can all go out. And I will have learned nothing. My
Mhm.
writing won't get any better. And I will have no connection with my audience or the people on the email list. Yet that's available, and my fear is that there's a generation, or maybe it's just my projection. There's a generation that goes, yeah, but who fucking cares?
Mhm.
Now my emails are done.
Yeah.
Where some of us quote older guys, and I'm going to put you in that category, even though you're young, go, yeah, but you're missing the point of doing anything.
Mhm.
Like the point of doing anything is to see how it spills into everything. So would you mind just speaking on that for a minute?
Yeah, I'll steal from the late great Alan Watts on this. He talked about this, and so I don't think this is really anything new because he was delivering this message in the 70s. But
Mm,
the idea that the endpoint is the is the main point, right?
mm,
Is I think flawed, right? If that were the case, then the objectively best orchestras in the world would be the ones that got to the end the fastest, right?
yeah,
It would be
yeah.
one note. Bam, that's it. And then
Mhm,
man, that's amazing, right? But so we tend to place so much emphasis on the arrival, and I
mhm,
think the realization that there really is no arrival. We have this idea of chasing a horizon, right? Or getting to the top of the mountain, whatever analogy you want to paint. But a true horizon, unless you're subscribing to the flat Earth model. But if we suspend some disbelief and believe in a more spherical shape, uh, then that horizon never ends. There is no arrival. You can walk
mm,
till the day that you die, and you will never get to that fixed point on the horizon because it is always moving. And I think that's the idea. The point
mhm,
of dancing is not to end up at a certain spot on the floor, right?
mhm,
The point of dancing is to enjoy the music and the movement while the song is being played. And I think we
mhm,
forget that. We get so, we live in such a hustle culture mindset that it's get the emails done. It's, scale your business, all of these things, which yeah, sure, I'm not above using tools to make things more efficient, right?
Sure.
Like there are times when if I need to cut down a tree, I'm going to use a chainsaw instead
Mhm.
of an axe, right?
Mhm.
And I'm certainly not going to use a pocket knife, right?
Right.
Like the right tool for the job
Mhm.
makes sense. But man, the appreciation for a chainsaw when you
Mhm.
felled a tree with an axe goes a long way.
Mhm.
The appreciation for a orbital sander when you have sanded something by hand goes a long way. And when you do things kind of more in that analog sense, not only do you gain, have a lot more gratitude for the technology and the advancement of tools, but you also, I think, learn more intricacy of whatever it is, right? I can take the hard way and what I've learned of doing it like that, and I can apply it to make the usage of that orbital sander even more effective. So I
Mhm.
think that's a part that we're missing out.
Mhm.
And again, when we're trying to expedite everything that we do, man, just cut to the chase, just skip to the end, like be 90 years old and be done with it all, right?
Mhm.
Like at what point do you end up wishing away your entire life? And I get it, man. Emails can be very tedious. And and automation in certain aspects is a wonderful thing, right?
Mhm.
But also if you outsource all of your thinking, all of your action,
Mhm.
what are you actually even doing, right? I
Mhm.
mean, at a certain point, man, I'll just tag somebody in to go to jiu-jitsu class and do all my rules for me, right? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
man, it hurts when people, you know, twist me up. So I'm gonna let you go do it. Report back how we did.
Yeah.
What and then I'm gonna say, yeah, no, I earned my brown belt in jujitsu. I'm a two stripe blue belt, whatever you're at. You finally
Yeah.
make it to black belt, and you're like, yep, I'm a black belt. And then you get into some actual, heaven forbid, real world altercation, right? And guess what? The black belt that you outsourced to AI or whomever actually did the classes for you isn't going to help you when this person is like throwing you down on the ground.
Yeah. My black belt avatar is not going to fight his black belt avatar. Tie this in if you would for me, or even we can tease it out together.
Mhm.
How do you see this way of thought, this way of thinking, this way of being play into confidence? Because a
Mm.
lot of the struggle or pain point I hear from men, especially younger guys, is like, how do you develop confidence? I want to be more confident. And other than saying, go fuck up 1,000 times, get 10,000 reps in, and and don't beat yourself up after every time you tap. I don't have much for you. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious when you hear like the way you live feels, or the way you're speaking, Josh, it feels very holistic
Mhm.
and again contemplative, but also feels like at the end of every day there will be confidence almost as a natural byproduct, as opposed to, oh, I tried to hack my confidence, so these are the things I did. So let's just riff on confidence for a little bit. When
Yeah.
you work with guys, or you've had guys in your ecosystem, or even your children or
Mhm.
yourself, how do you develop it, or have you helped develop it?
I mean, there's a lot of different pathways in this, and I think each person, you know, maybe has their own to go. Yeah, I can't say one is better than the other. You can just jump right in the deep end, and if you don't drown, well, guess what? You're probably a lot more confident in your swimming ability.
Mm,
And sometimes people don't have a choice. They get tossed in the deep end,
right.
and they fight and they claw and they figure it out. And we see those people, and they will often advise kind of this burn the boats mentality,
Mm,
right? Like, well, that's how I did it. I
mhm,
burned the boats. I had no other option, and so I just figured it out. And
mhm,
that definitely is a way. Um but I don't know that we have to necessarily self-impose that level of uh, consequence. There do need to be consequences in whatever we do. This is why martial arts and jiu-jitsu, combatives, boxing, whatever that modality is, even bushcraft and survival, I think the consequences of failure are pretty immediate, right? Like, man, if you can't get that fire going, you're going to have a really shitty night,
Yep.
right? And so
Yep.
it really does help reinforce, okay, I need to go back to the drawing board on this. If you're getting just manhandled every time you step on the mats, that feedback is instant, but none of it is fatal. And I think that's the biggest thing, is being able to create effectively a playground. Now, it can be a very serious playground, right? To most people, a bloody nose is kind of a big thing. In the grand scheme of things, it really isn't. Getting punched in the face and having your nose bleed isn't, a picnic, but it's also like no one's going to die from a little blood trickling out of their nose, or, getting water eyes, even a black eye, right? Versus going to pressure test that, in the wrong side of town, and I thought we were going to get in a fist fight. This person pulls out a knife and now I'm dead. Right. Like, so being able to create circumstances where you can play, but play seriously, and in an ideal world, just slowly increase the intensity of it as you develop the requisite skills, I think is the ideal on ramp for confidence. And again, if we get that as a child, then that's kind of the best place, right? So you give your kid a little bit of responsibility, you step back a little bit, you make sure they're not going to die, but that their choices have consequences. And so if they scrape their knees, okay, hey, what did we learn? How do we do better? You don't want the failure to be so catastrophic that they never want to get back on the bike again, or whatever it is. But you do need like enough feedback to say, hey, that wasn't as good as it could be, right? And oftentimes the physical pain of, in gymnastics, falling off the beam or the high bar or whatever implement you're doing, it doesn't feel great. Like I've got to dabble in a little bit of myself, and like, man, if you shin the bar on the high bar, like it changes your tune a little bit on how you're doing it. And so now you have to overcome this fear, I think, which is a really important aspect as well. And so if you can get that as a child, then when you're an adult, it just kind of comes natural. That confidence is already there. I think the problem is what you're seeing, and I see often as well, is we have so many men that were never given that opportunity. The consequences of failure were so traumatic that it left a permanent scar. And so, or they were never, or they're a younger guy, they were never given any opportunity to build that confidence. Now they're thrust out in the world and they're terrified. They don't even know where to begin. And so, like, the fear of failure, because they've never actually been given the opportunity to taste it, they've been so, I don't want to say coddled, but they've been so insulated from the real world and any meaningful consequence or any meaningful, like, kind of pain points, that now the prospect of that discomfort is paralyzing. And so you just see guys that aren't sure even which way to move. As long as I'm safe and I'm comfortable right here in this spot, that's where I'm going to stay. So you kind of have both ends of the spectrum: guys that got, severely burned by the stove, and guys that were just never allowed to even look at the stove. And so either one of those, it's going to be hard for them to be able to cook very well.
Yeah. I broke Uncivilized down into two main male archetypes when we started, which was the 1950s Marlboro man, which you can probably is more of your savage, and the sensitive new age guy or nice guy, which was the pendulum swing. But in the last couple of years, a third archetype has really arrived in the masculine collective, which I have no other word for other than like the collapsed male, which is sort of this failure to thrive, failure to launch, 28-year-old dude who's living in his parents' basement still, playing video games, smoking a lot of dope, jerking off to a lot of porn. And it's like, yeah, life's kind of good, but it's good because mom and dad are bringing food down and paying
Mm-hmm.
the rent. But I feel like that archetype is growing and growing and growing as more men don't get in the tussle of anything.
Mm-hmm.
I check in with my assistant tells me what to do, I go about my day, kind of like what you outlined in the beginning. And I'm curious if we go beyond our natural inclinations, your and mine, which is like everybody should fucking do jujitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody should have to spend 3 days alone in the woods and be like, wow, I'm a very fragile thing. Other than those two endpoints, do you have like a middle space where you start guys or recommend? I'm trying to put myself in the place of the guy listening who's like,
Yeah.
you know what, man, I don't want to do jujitsu and bushcraft's not for me. I'm not looking for a particular modality, but I'm looking for more of a, I don't even know what, Josh, like not a mindset, but some path forward that doesn't include those two.
I, I mean, as far as a mindset, I say this, I don't know. I've said it at least more than once. The guys that I work with and have done stuff with have probably heard it a few times, but there's an idea that often the thing that got you to the place where you are may not be the thing that gets you to the place where you want to be.
Yeah.
And that applies to guys who are pretty exceptional at stuff in, along with the guys that have never really done a lot.
Yeah.
It works in both ways. And I think that is that realization of like, if you want things to change, things need to actually change. And
Yeah.
yeah, sure, if you don't want to do jujitsu, don't do jujitsu. You can pick whatever modality. When we do our experiences in our events, we're doing different activities. But the activities don't matter themselves. They're just
Yeah.
vehicles,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't matter if we're doing boxing or we're raising a barn or whatever. Like, it's something that it needs to be probably novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that you're unfamiliar with and it's new.
Right.
There needs to be some level of challenge to it. Like it
Mm-hmm.
can't just be, something you can do with zero effort or energy. And I think that there does need to be some level of consequence to failure, just simply because you need the feedback, not because, oh, you need to suffer and you got to endure all this hardship. I mean, you can take a masochistic line if you want to, but I think that it becomes very short lived, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said something before, tell me instead of 75 hard, tell me about 365 hard. I
Mm-hmm.
would prefer 365 medium. I subscribe to 365 medium all
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have purposefully crafted what I would call a hard day in my
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm.
Now, granted, hardness is relative. I have
Sure.
done hard things, and I have found myself in hard situations. But even
Mm-hmm.
at the peak of my career, and take this with whatever grain of salt you need to, right? Because I was not the foremost, most prolific fighter on the planet while I was competing. I mean, I won
Mm-hmm.
far more than I lost, but I'm probably the okayest fighter that most people have never heard of, right? As a professional MMA fighter. And I don't say that to be some kind of false humility. I think that's very accurate. And so, yeah, if you're going to be the best dude in the world at something, um, yeah, you might have to like break yourself off and David
Mm-hmm.
Goggins your way through whatever it is you're doing. But even still, like
Mm-hmm.
I think Goggins has a very masochistic and needlessly
For sure.
masochistic take on stuff. When you look at the best people in the world, like they don't break themselves in the preparation. They may do it you know in the actual event itself, but it's like, man, there's a longevity component, right? If
Yeah.
every training workout you're throwing up and
Right.
if you're not puking at the end of it, and you feel like that's not good enough, look at every professional athlete. How many guys have you ever seen hurl on a basketball court?
Right.
They don't. Why? Because you don't need to, like, the mark of success is not pushing yourself to that limit, right? But
Yeah.
we have, again, it sounds way cooler and it's way
Right.
better for the gram to show your sweat angel
Right.
and all these, and I'm not above hard work, but this idea that you have to, like, every day destroy yourself,
Mm.
I don't think is useful. I think you do need to prove that you're not a pussy, right? Like, you
Mhm.
need to do something hard enough to be like, okay, I do have a certain level of toughness. Prove that you're tough, and then prove that you're not stupid, right? And
Right.
I think
Beautiful.
a lot of times people forget the second half of that,
Right.
where they're just like, no. But that's where the thing that got you where you are may not get you. Like, for me, I realized this in my fight career, in my training. It's like, man, my toughness is actually hindering my progress. Like, if I was less tough, I would probably develop more skill and therefore
Mhm.
be better at this. And it took me, much
Mm.
later than I care to admit in my career to come to that realization. And
Yeah.
so if we can bear that in mind and understand that yeah, you've got to find a shift somewhere, and it doesn't really matter what it is. It needs to be different than what you're doing, and it needs to be intentional. uh,
Mm.
I think that would be, if there's a short mantra, right, to give someone. I agree with you. Jiu-jitsu and survival. Go sleep in the woods for 3 days, you'll figure some stuff out. uh
Yeah.
and I kind of stand by those things. Like, yeah, go get punched in the face, right? If you've never been punched in the face, you're missing out on some key developmental
Mhm.
pieces, I think. And
Yeah.
I don't know. If you would be able to replace those with anything else. You probably could. And there's people whose lives were violent enough, in different ways, that it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you specifically don't, right? There's always going to be
Right.
exceptions. So I'm not saying this applies to every individual, but as a general rule, like, yeah, man, you gotta get a little bit dirty. If you're not, if there's no blood, sweat, and tears at any point in what you're doing, like, you're maybe selling yourself short from what your potential
Mm.
actually is.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I found the things that, whether it's entrepreneurship, running a business, uh, long-term relationship, you're going to get in the shit at some point, and you're going to have something to lean back on and rely upon, even if it's not in that exact modality of like, oh, this reminds me of being down by 2 points with 5 seconds left in the third round, and I got to dig deep and pull out of this. I think everybody needs that.
Well, and what
And
you're referring to there is essentially that's a peak experience, right?
mm,
And if you when you have these peak experiences, they kind of serve as a lighthouse or a guidepost. They're a reference point that you can then look to and hopefully draw strength and confidence from. It's like, okay, I know this is different.
yeah,
Like, man, things are pretty brutal in this boardroom, but you know I was losing, the first two rounds, and bloodied up, and I was able to rally and come back and get the submission with 30. It's this, this isn't as hard as that, right?
right,
Having that, and this
right,
is where and I'm sure you probably speak to this quite a bit. This is where, a rite of passage is
yeah,
so important. And unfortunately, we don't have a collectively agreed upon version of it. That is not to say that guys haven't had any rite of passage, but I think,
mhm,
you know, when your perspective or your opinion of a rite of passage and mine are different, I may not be validated as a man in your eyes if I didn't
mhm,
do the boss 28-day challenge,
right,
or
right,
whatever it is. It's like, well, yeah, man, you could say whatever you want to, but until you step into the cage, like, you're not a
right,
real man, right? Like, we have these
right,
weird arbitrary
yeah, yeah,
definitions that
yeah,
vary from culture to culture, in group to in group, right?
yeah,
Um, you dirt biking communities, I'm sure there's a certain level of jump that you have to hit to like, earn your stripes in that. And so because it's not collectively agreed upon, like me as a professional fighter, it was hard going into a corporate world. Like I could choke out every person in this room. And I feel like that should command a certain level of respect, but no one here gives a flying fuck what I can do in that regard. They just need to know how much money can I make them. That's the bottom line. And it was really hard to kind of step in that position and be like, oh man, I have all these skills that are meaningless in this thing. And the one thing that matters, I'm actually not very good at. These guys are so much better at this specific thing that now I kind of got to like take a back seat and you know what I mean? Defer to them because I don't have that skill set. Right. And so I'm not validated in that circle in that way. And I think that makes it hard. But if we can have and create those rites of passages, then again, we can carry that forward somewhat and be like, all right, well, maybe I don't have that here in this facet or in this environment, but I do have it elsewhere. And I can bring that confidence until I earn that respect or place in that circle, right? It's not going to be given to you. I think, you have to, as a man, you have to, or just as a person in general, like you have to prove a certain level of capability in order to receive, the measure of responsibility that comes with that. Right. That's not to say that your value lies solely in what you can do. Right. I think everyone has inherent value, but you were talking about guys backing you up in a fight. Like I'm, man, this guy might be the best musician that I've ever heard. This guy absolutely rips on the didgeridoo, but he's might not be the guy that I call over to help, put up a deck or, have my back when things get a little bit spicy. Right.
Yeah.
We're jamming out. We're holding ceremony. That guy's number one. We got to have the didge dude. Right. But, he hasn't earned, and I think that that's okay to acknowledge, right? This idea that, well, we're all special, unique. We are for sure. But like, there are people that I'm picking for different teams for different purposes. And I think to deny that is kind of foolish.
Yeah. Do you happen to know Tim Morrison, by the way? Do you know Tim? Australian guy.
That name sounds so familiar.
Yeah, he does a lot of breathwork stuff, like travels and does ceremony. And he's, I think he was the ex-Pride fighter who's also massive on the didgeridoo. So I'm sure he's given the nod to this podcast right now.
All right, one exception. He's like, whoa, man, what?
You'll get a strongly worded email from Tim Morrison.
He's like, just at me. I'm like, yeah, it's my bad. I tried to pick the two most like disparate things, and of course there is one guy out there who's like
just one guy,
absolute badass. That's so funny.
Josh, I'd love to wrap this up with a conversation around power.
Okay.
And this is something that was given to me by a mentor, a therapist I was seeing for a number of years who recently passed. His name was Tom Elsner. He talked about in Jungian psychology, the tension of opposites. And when you have something on one end of the spectrum and something on the other end of the spectrum, but they're held in energetic container, that the energy between them is quite potent. And when I hear savage gentleman, primal divine, like MMA and artistry, that there's some deep energy flowing between these two because they're polar opposites. And so I'm curious if you have a thought, how do I frame this? Not on power dynamics, because even though I think you're a fascinating person to ask about power dynamics, given you have a physical skill set that most people don't, and a philosophical view of the world that most people don't. But when you have savage gentlemen together, or any polarizing end of spectrums like that, do you feel the inherent power between the two of them rather than if it was just savage and gentleman, or, primal, divine? And can you speak to, for men who want to develop a more clean, I want to use the word clean
Mm-hmm.
or directive relationship with power itself. I know this is a very open-ended term.
Sure.
How do you navigate the world powerfully, and
Mm,
how do you help support men develop a relationship with that word that's not just the distorted, for
sure.
lack of a better thought?
It's really interesting because I have never considered the power aspect. I have some thoughts on that tension that we can get into.
Sure.
But in terms of like power, and being powerful, like I don't know that that's ever really kind of crossed my my lexicon as far as like things that I'm considering, especially like for myself. I mean, I think that there
Mhm.
is I don't know, there is something inherent about wanting to be powerful, right? Or at the
Mhm.
very least to not. I mean, what is the opposite in that model that you would say? The opposite of powerful would be weak, right? Or helpless?
Or disempowered.
Disempowered. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we all at a very basic level have a desire to exert some level of influence on the world around us, right? And I guess maybe
Mhm.
that could be the definition of power, or a definition. I don't know. I mean, maybe when you refer
I
to
have a good
power.
one. Yeah, my mentor, Dewey Freeman, says the definition of power is the ability to influence and be influenced in relationship.
Okay.
So whether that's human to human, animal, the world, God, sexual,
Hmm.
jujitsu, whatever it is, to influence and be influenced.
Okay. Is there a dynamic? Is it equal parts influence and be influenced, or is the powerful doing more of the is the more of the influencer? So the more you can influence, the more powerful you are. Is in that model?
I would say if we look at it from how most people are interested in it, definitely.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think what he's saying is the comma and be influenced keeps it relational.
Hmm.
Where if you just throw me, if you just beat the shit out of me on the mat for 7 minutes and I'm dead, I'm just like, oh, that I didn't learn anything. But if I move one little way, that you're like, oh wow, that was an interesting defense he
Hmm.
threw together. We've now influenced each other, but you're
Yes.
clearly more
Yep.
powerful.
I okay, yeah, I like that because the other model, and I think that this is what is kind of a distorted model of power. Um, Eventually, it becomes um, what's the word I'm looking for? A kind of a vacuum, so to speak. It's recursive, right?
Mm,
Because there's nothing new coming in.
hmm.
Right?
Right.
If I am only ever exerting
Hmm.
influence and I'm never receiving and I'm not never influenced by anything, then eventually like that runs out of material, right? The
Yeah.
creative force works in both, like for however much output there also needs to be input. And so when you have a model, and you see this in a lot of different ways, but just from a leadership model, right? That organization is going to eventually wither and die because there's nothing new coming in. It's one guy,
Hmm.
my way or the highway, and ultimately that's going to run its course and fail if he's not bringing in new information. Now, conversely, if all you're doing is receiving, then nothing ever happens, right? This kind of comes back to the idea of tension that we were talking about, where you have to care enough to actually take action on something, but
Mm,
you have to not care enough to release it into the world, so to speak, right? The only way to throw a ball is you actually have to let go of that ball, right?
right.
But also, if you never start the motion, you're not going to throw it either, right? So there is a bit of a paradox at play there, and I think that we exist in that tension of finding that sweet spot of like, man, I really need to care deeply about this thing, whatever it is I'm doing, but I also have to let go of the illusion of control, right? Where I'm
Mm,
not white knuckling and death gripping something to the point of you know, suffocating it. And if we look at the model of the universe, right, like there is a sweet spot that the gravitational pull of the cosmos, right, holds a planet in orbit. If it was any stronger, everything would collapse and implode, right? If it was any weaker, it would spin off into nothing, and the entire, you know, universe
Mm,
would entropically dissolve into nothing, right? It would just, the big freeze model. And if
mhm,
we look at it, you know, at an atomic level, it's kind of the same way, right? There's a force that holds the electron in orbit around the nucleus, right? And that whatever that is, right? I think that model works with us as well at a human scale, right? In our ambition, in our desires, and whatever it is we're doing, we need to find and maintain that sweet spot. And I think, you know, we're given free will and all of this autonomy that we get to kind of, you know, the electron doesn't get to decide where it sits relative to the nucleus, right?
right.
um I think we're given a lot of leeway as to where we're going to sit, but
Mm,
you know, too close or too far, right? Too close
mhm,
to the fire, you're getting burned. Too far away, you're too cold. And so like our objective is kind of finding where that sweet spot is and exploring, right? But you don't
mhm,
know where that level is if you haven't gone too far in one direction to the other. Now, it doesn't mean you jump in the fire. It doesn't mean you sit outside and you freeze to death. But you need to know, okay, what's too hot and what's too cold. And we do that through experience.
mm,
And if we can map those experiences and we can kind of stack and build upon them, then we, I think, have a much better perspective, and we learn to operate in that tension a little bit more gracefully. I think where guys struggle is they're kind of yo-yoing back and forth, right? They're ping-ponging from
mhm,
one side to the other to the other to the other. And again, I think you should explore the map. I think you should know, and it's okay to express and feel, you know, the good with the bad. But if you're finding yourself being exhausted, or that maybe you're powerless in your life, then maybe the tension is off, and maybe you need to move a
mm,
little bit closer to the fire, or maybe you need to back away from it.
mhm.
And there's so many analogies to make here, but that's, I don't know if that answered the question or not. I feel like I might have taken a couple rabbit holes
It's okay.
process.
I appreciate your answer, and it was more of an open ended. Like, let's kind of riff on this. I find it really interesting. It feels like what's coming up culturally right now with the Epstein list and with politics, with suicide rates in men, is there's some holistic experience of power that's missing. That we see a very distorted model of power over abuse, or we find a lot of guys around us who have, or I get, maybe it's just my own contact, the people who have just kind of given up. And where in the middle can a guy go, yeah, it's beautiful to be powerful, and there's a responsibility to it that I may not have seen modeled. And go ahead, I
I
see.
I think what you're referring to is the illusion that most guys are under, that they are in fact powerless. And I think what
Mm,
what what we're trying to do with Savage Gentlemen, what I'm trying to do in the experiences and the things, the, you know, in-person events that we have, is to shatter that illusion, right? To show guys that, like, hey, you've never not been in power.
mm,
Not because nothing to do with your strength or capability, your intellect, all of these characteristics that we, I think, you know, are virtuous in themselves. Like, yeah, get smarter, get stronger, get more, whatever you want to become. But the power that you have and have always had, and that it cannot be taken away from you unless you acquiesce it, is the power of perspective, right?
mm,
Your power is in how you perceive the world. And the only way you can gain new perspective is by doing new things and looking at
Mm.
something. So that the model, going back to the original thing, like what I saw in guys that was very empowering for them, and in recognizing their capability, is they were
Yeah.
able to see themselves from a different angle, right?
Mm.
And that gave them more information. It's like looking at a problem, you're untying a knot, right? Well, if you can only look and manipulate that knot from one point on a three-dimensional plane, you're going to be really limited. Good freaking
Yeah.
luck, right? But if
Yeah.
I can get around the backside and I can look
Mhm.
underneath and I can see where it's
Yeah.
bound, then I can start to unravel this thing. And what was a problem no longer is. And I do
Yeah.
that through perspective, and I gain that perspective through experience. And then, I think the last part about that is it helps. You can do it on your own, but it helps to have someone who is there to witness that experience and then help point out and connect those dots, and
Yeah.
I think solidify that perspective a little bit better. And this is why we have guides, this is why we have mentors, this is why we have
Mhm.
other people in our lives, right? If
For sure.
nothing else, to simply hold up a mirror and give us a reflection. You can never see the back of your own head.
Mhm.
You can't. It's
Yeah.
impossible, right? You can only see a reflection of it. But to do that, you
Mhm.
have to have a mirror. So to understand what you look like from behind, you need a tool. To get the full picture of who you are as a person, you need a tool, which is other
Mhm.
people. And so the better I am able to reflect a true image back to someone that's not distorted, then the better they're going to be able to reflect that the image of myself back. And now that is really kind of the model I think we're supposed to serve, right? Is to reflect a true image to one another, that with as little distortion as possible. And I think
Yeah.
right now we live in a world that the reflection that most men is seeing is very distorted. They're not seeing themselves. I say this all the time. If you could see yourself the way that God sees you,
Mm.
you wouldn't have anything to worry about, right? It doesn't make you perfect, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you just have to do nothing and to
Right.
like exist, right? But that confidence, that fear, that doubt, all of these things that guys stress over would start to dissolve. And I think for a lot of people, it's hard for them. That's a big ask to say, hey, see
Mm.
yourself the way that God sees you.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck, right? But if we can, and this is what I think we're called to do, if we can hold up that mirror, if we can see each other and serve as that model, right, as the best of our ability to see each other
Yeah.
the way God sees us, then we can show and be that reflection that other people need, and they can start to see it. And so I think, from a holistic standpoint, being able trying to adopt that model, right? Whatever your religious belief standpoint is or isn't, right? You can replace God with whatever you want to, source, the
Mhm.
universe, creator, or I mean, I guess we're nothing, right? I mean, even if you believe that there's nothing out there bigger than you, I still think it's a good model to be
Mhm.
to give people a true, honest reflection, um, whatever your background is.
Beautiful. Let's put a pin in it there, brother.
Okay, yeah.
For people who want to find you, want to find your work, where can we send them? Where are you hanging out on social media at all these days?
Yeah, I do more than I probably would care to, but I don't have a better answer. I don't, I do believe strongly in what we're doing, and if I just sit in my woods all day and whittle and carve wood and build campfires by myself, the likelihood of anyone stumbling on upon that is probably zero. So
Yeah.
I do have to put it out there, and so I've got my uh Instagram page is Josh Tyler MMA.
Okay.
Even though I don't do as much MMA as I once did, it's been around long enough. It just is what it is. So Josh Tyler MMA, and then Savage Gentleman Official, Gentleman singular,
Okay.
is the, I guess, the business handle. And we're actually transitioning away from the retail side. For a long time, we're
Mm.
selling merch, we're making leather
Hmm.
goods, and we've got apparel, which is all well and good. I think we've made incredible stuff over the years, but looking at the landscape of the world that we live in today, I don't think we need more artifacts of
Mm.
masculinity. I think we need more experience. I think we need
Yeah.
more interaction, more community, more interface. And I think that that is for me moving forward, it's so much more compelling. And so we're in a phase right now where we're getting rid of all of the products. So if you wanted to get something, now's the time to get it. Whatever's left, when it's gone, it's gone. It's on sale. So um, savagegentleman.com, you can go there and you can get kind of a preview of what's coming with the events and the things that we're going to be doing in the future. And if that's something you feel compelled to be a part of, then reach out, hit me up, and we'll see what we can make happen.
Beautiful. Thanks for coming on, brother. I appreciate your time, appreciate your expertise, and really just appreciate the way you look at the world and your articulation of it. It's always a pleasure to speak to people who do. Thank you for joining me.